Now we're getting to our closing talk, and it's going to be given by Joe Matthews, who you've heard from a little bit already yesterday. It's about the future of policy, at least on the UK scale, but I'm sure there's many lessons we can apply to other countries as well. This is a talk that, just like the previous one, is focusing on the things coming. So do take notes. We will be sharing the presentations later as well, and all the contact details. And if you just think of any questions, we'll do a quick Q&A at the end of it. But I'll hand over to Joe to start, and then Tom is going to also do a section of it, as I understand. So, brilliant. Over to you, Joe. Okay.
Didn't get the memo. So thank you, everyone. So for those of you who weren't here yesterday, my name is Joe Matthews. I'm the Principal Engineer in the Civil Engineering team at Southend on CCD Council. And this is Tom Palmer, who is one of the senior engineers within the team. So, right, see if I can get to the first slide. There we go. Right, so future of nature-based solutions. So we've spoken a lot really over the last few days about how we're going to mainstream nature-based solutions, what's the drivers, how's it going to happen, obviously for me primarily in the UK. So I think firstly there's two misconceptions. I think after listening to some of the talks and some of the feedback I've heard over the last few days, I think there's a misconception that hard engineering and concrete is the preferred option for the UK. And I have to say, obviously, where I have, the work I have done and the people I've worked with and my colleagues, that's not my experience at all. I don't find that to be the common practice at all. And I saw a statement yesterday, which I thought was really, really good, which basically said, soft nature-based solutions where possible, hard engineering defences wherever necessary. I don't know whose slide that was, but I thought that was absolutely spot on. And that is basically what we're going to be talking about today and the project and the work that we are doing in the UK. So I'm just going to get this to whiz down a bit. Right, so again, if you think back to Amy's presentation yesterday with her Pearl approach, I mean, it was quite, it's a very good demonstration of what is happening in the UK at the moment, coming from national strategy, and it's an approach that Southend City Council are taking through the Catchment to Coast project, which we're going to talk about in a little bit later as we move forwards. Basically, the two key documents on the screen, the strategy and the policy statement, those are really the key documents in the UK that are going to bring about this change, a change that we all want and we all want to see. Basically, the strategy kind of sets out the government's commitment, really, I suppose, to reform flood and coastal erosion risk management in the UK, and it kind of sets out the pathway for how we can look to change the funding mechanisms and also the measures that are acceptable as we go forwards. The strategy also sets out the government's kind of realisation, I think, the recognition that one approach doesn't fit all, and that the coastal zone or the flooding areas, it's all very dynamic and it's very changing. It's not a static process. And there is the need now to start incorporating nature-based solutions, to look at enhancing innovation measures and to basically make us a more resilient nation. So on the screen there, I've just quickly taken a snapshot of the three key ambitions from the strategy. I'm not going to read it out, obviously, in full. If you want to go to the strategy, it's in there. And basically, the approach is to make, as it says there, helping communities at risk of flooding and coastal change to respond, recover and adapt in a changing climate. So that's the key message from the strategy. Before we go into FCRIP, I just wanted to give a little bit more background. So across the UK at the moment, DEFRA is funding a series of flood and coastal erosion innovation programmes. I'm not sure that everyone is aware of that, and in case it comes back to my comment about the beware the interreg bubble yesterday. So at present time, there are 3 key demonstration programmes running. So FCRIT, the Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme, which we're going to talk about in a minute. There's also CTAP, which is the Coastal Acceleration Transition Programme, and also the Adapted Pathways Programme. Now, all that information is being gathered through demonstration projects, and that information is going to go back to DEFRA, and that is going to be used to inform our strategies and our future approach to flood and coastal risk management going forwards. And we also spoke as well yesterday about where is all this data, how can people collaborate, where can people find it. Well, the EA has actually set up the Engagement HQ, the Engagement Hub. So all of the information from these programmes, which are going to basically take forward our future policy, is there. It's open to the public, so you can go in there, you can see what's happening, you can follow the programmes, you can join the conversation. So I think there is that big recognition in the UK that this is the way forward, this is the way we need to move. So FGRIP, the Flood and Coastal Resilience Programme, obviously we've just heard from Cornwall explaining a bit about it, so I'm not going to really go through the principles, but it's basically the government's commitment to delivering what is set out in the actual statement. Sorry. God, me in IT, I'm terrible, aren't I? So, as Cornwall said, there's 25 projects within FGRIP. Catchment to Coast is just one of them. And Tom's going to speak about that in a bit more detail for you as well shortly. Hang on, wrong slide. There we go. So, as we said there, the whole point of doing these programmes is that DEFRA wants any future strategy to be data-led. So lots of people have been doing various different kind of nature-based solutions, but what they want to make sure is that any future change is based on solid evidence and there's no gaps in the understanding, and that is why these programmes have been set up, and that is where the information will go to the ministers. It will be considered, and then DEFRA will then decide the future of flood and coastal erosion management in the UK, whether that's what measures will be acceptable, what will be funded, etc., etc. So a quick slide here, just demonstrating some of the issues we obviously have in the Southend area. When we talk about flood and coastal erosion risk management, we talk about the whole catchment. So whilst we're looking at the coast, we're also looking at what happens inland too. We're looking at the whole hydraulic catchment and that interaction with the coastal zone. So, catchment to coast. Why did Southend City Council and the other 11 partners get together and create an application to undertake this project, catchment to coast? As we all know, across the world and also in Southend and Thurrock, we're experiencing a lot more frequent and what we call multi-source flooding events. So, in Southend, for example, we have a lot of flooding, but it's not normally from one receptor. If we have flooding, it's because of heavy rainfall. There is normally the interaction from an overcharged utilities network, from a river being banked full, and also we have the lucky joy of having the tide and becoming tide locked as well. So when we're talking about the future of kind of management of these issues, we have to look at that as a catchment approach. So we're moving away from looking at these issues in isolation. The other reason we've put the project together is because obviously currently funding arrangements for the UK doesn't fit with Southend, and it also doesn't fit with Thurrock. We have a lot of our flooding and our erosion areas. They're quite scattered locations. They don't traditionally attract funding. As we all know, it's how many houses can you move from out of one property, risk of flooding to another. In Southend, as you drove around yesterday, you'll see quite a lot of our houses are pushed right back from our foreshore. So behind our defences, we have utilities, we have major networks, we have railway lines, all those kind of things that when you're applying for grant funding, you don't get anything. So that's always the position we have been in. And when we're thinking about the coastal zone as well, we've also there's a legacy in the UK of historic landfill sites. So where you went yesterday to Two Tree Island, that is one of them. So behind the nature reserve at the front, there is also a historic landfill. And again, nobody lives there. There's no major infrastructure. Not anything that's going to attract partnership funding. So these are kind of the projects when we apply for funding, they fall down the legs of the stool and we don't attract anything. So we were really keen to be involved in FCRIT because this is kind of the opportunity for us to be given funding for these actual sites and actually try and innovate and prove that we can, through different approaches and using innovation techniques, we can get benefit. And that is why we're really keen to be involved in the project, because this is our opportunity to demonstrate that nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture, retrofitting of SUDs, all of these things which we wouldn't normally get money for, have got such great benefit that they should be considered in the future. So just a quick overview of the Catchment to Coast project. There's 12 key partners in the project. Southend and Thurrock are the lead partners. We've also got Castle Point, Rochford District Council, Anglian Water, the Environment Agency, Essex Wildlife Trust, Thames 2100, Ambiotech, and the two universities, King College London and University of Essex, and we're also supported technically by Mott MacDonald. So as you can see, there's a whole raft of people involved in this project. And I thought back to the presentation yesterday, actually, about the Frodo and the Ring and the Fellowship. And that's why we're all working together, because we have a vast amount of skills and knowledge and experience. And by tackling these problems that we commonly encounter together, we hope we should be much more successful at trying to address them. So the project objectives, I've just popped them there. Catchment to Coast will take a strategic approach to flood and coastal erosion risk management. So what we mean by that is administrative boundaries don't matter. It's not Southend's water, it's not Essex County Council's water, it's everybody's water and it's everybody's problem. So that is why we've got a whole variety of local authorities working with us, which is really great, and it's actually, you know, it's already showing benefits, which is great. The project also is looking at the innovation of individual measures, but as I said, we're taking the catchment approach, so we're trying to understand what are those individual benefits and what is the collective benefits of them all across the catchment. And we're also monitoring to make sure one doesn't have a negative kind of impact on another measure. And the key to all this project really is innovation. So nature-based solutions will form part of that. They'll either form a part of that in isolation, or they may form a part of that in a hybrid approach. So half nature, half grey infrastructure. And what we're aiming to get out of this at the end is basically a long-term strategic management approach for all of the water in the catchment and the erosion issues that we encounter. So I'll just skip on to the next one. So I'm going to hand over to Tom now, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the sites. Sorry. So yeah, boy racer out there. So Tom's going to talk a little bit more about the locations and what we're planning to do. As Cornwall said, we haven't finalised quite a lot of this because we need to do a lot more engagement with people, but these are just the areas that we put into our expression of interest, common areas and common issues we want to basically resolve through the partnership.
Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you very much, Joe. So yeah, as Joe said, I'll go through the project in a bit more detail, give you a bit of a flavour for what we're doing and where we're doing it. So hopefully you can see from the map, get an idea of the spread of the projects across Thurrock, Southend, and then a bit of Essex in between as well. So you can see the pier, so we're right at the top of that at the moment, and then Two Tree Island where you went yesterday, so quite a big coverage there. So as Joe said, we're taking a catchment approach here. So looking at measures of the upper catchment, middle catchment and lower catchment. And I'll go through those in a bit more detail in a second. But the upper catchment is mostly the kind of the rural areas, and where we're looking at kind of things like regenerative agriculture, and we've got a bit more space to play with. The mid catchment is more SUDS-based, water storage and reuse and retrofit in the urban areas. And then obviously the coastal measures, which are linked to the coast or its close proximity. So we've got 16 sites across the whole area, and those are ones that have come forward as part of the work we've done so far. We've got many more kind of backup sites, so if you get problems with landowners or reasons for whatever reason we can't take a site forward, we've got some kind of ready and waiting to progress. And one of the key things about all of these sites is the monitoring, which we touched on. That is the goal at the end of this, is to gather some data and some learning. So for every site, there will be very detailed, high-resolution modelling of various parameters, including water quality, flow rates, and things like that, depending on the interventions we're looking to do. And the goal of the learning is to determine the individual kind of effectiveness of a specific measure at a site. Compare that, so similar measures at different sites in different catchments, and compare them and see how they kind of perform in the kind of different scenarios. And then kind of the catchment approach to see how collectively the measures all add together to reduce flood risk, coastal erosion, and other factors. And again, innovation, it's an innovation project, so we've tried to fit innovation into all of the measures, be that the specific measure that's being installed, the location it's being installed at might not have been tried before, or combination might not have been done before, or it might even be to do with the process. So there are some kind of locations where we're looking at doing less modelling and less work up front to allow us to get in and to deliver the measures and then kind of see what happens afterwards. So in the upper catchment, then these are the sites we've got. We're looking at, as I said, it's kind of the rural areas. So in Stamford-le-Hope, for example, we're looking at putting in some leaky dams and with some mycelium matting as well to work out the effects on flow reductions and also water quality from agricultural runoff. That obviously has a bigger consequence on the catchment and then ultimately the estuary itself in terms of algal growths and things like that. We're looking at spike aeration in the golf course to improve infiltration, again reduce the amount of water that's coming off the site and into the brook and take the pressure off in times of heavy rainfall events. And in Bolton in the corner up here, what we're going to do there is provide some tools and resources to a community to help them deliver their own flood scheme, which is going to be interesting, I think. So we're not actually going to pay for the works, we're going to support them to deliver the works and then take ownership of those going forwards. Then the mid-catchment, so as I said, is more the urban areas. So we're looking at kind of SUDS retrofit on some residential streets, also in some highway areas as well to take water off the road and off roofs and things and keep it out of the sewer network or hold it and then just release it using smart water butts sort of in times of less demand on the sewer network. We're also looking at allotments as well for community water storage and reuse, so taking water off the highway, treating it via SUDS, capturing it, storing it, allowing it to be used. And again, a big focus of this is kind of the drought side of things. We've seen this summer that water is a resource that we either have too much of or too little of, and that's how it's going forward. So we're trying to flatten that kind of curve a little bit as part of these projects. And another big kind of theme through all of this is the hydro citizenship and making people aware of water as a resource and kind of getting that buy-in so people can understand that a bit better, that it is a vital resource that we're probably going to have issues with going forward, well, more issues with going forward in terms of having too much or not enough. And then the coastal sites. So as Joe said, we're focusing on historic landfills. So Two Tree is a historic landfill site and Coal House is an actively eroding historic landfill site. If you go there, you can actually see it kind of falling into the Thames, which isn't very nice. So at those sites, we're looking to put in kind of nature-based solutions, but in combination. So some on the direct kind of frontage, some in the intertidal area, so using things like potato matting as part of a Natural England project, which is a biodegradable kind of structure that promotes salt marsh regeneration and then kind of deteriorates away. And then also things further out into the intertidal area, kind of like floating barrier islands. So getting some vegetation on there to kind of propagate some plants, using it as a natural solution to break up the wave energy as well. What else are we doing? So East Tilbury is a visual warning system we're putting in because they get a lot of tidal flooding there. And Benfleet Creek, we're looking to put some mycelium beds in to treat the water that is coming out of a sewage treatment works there. They've got a couple of CSOs, and we think that's probably a factor in the water quality going downstream to Two Tree Island, because there's a lot of algal growth there, which is almost stifling the salt marsh regeneration. So those two kind of link together a bit. Okay, so I'll just very quickly go on to where we are and what we've done so far. So again, monitoring is a very key part of this project. We started deploying a lot of weather stations, which you can see from the pictures, and then monitoring equipment in surface water sewers as well with Anglian Water. We're deploying flow meters very soon as well to help get that baseline data before we implement the monitoring. As well, we've got a dedicated comms and engagement officer coming in very shortly, so that's going to be a big factor as part of this, the engagement with people, to allow us to deliver the measures and also the kind of the learning going forwards as well. And we've got a couple of PhD students as well. Part of the project is one from each university, so they'll be coming soon, and their role will be to analyse the data and kind of help us with the learning side of things. And another thing of note we're doing is developing a kind of community hub. So people, it's really, again, promote that hydro citizenship. And it'll be a place for the data gathering as well. So in terms of the water, but usage and kind of that side of things. And we're hoping to kind of foster a bit of competition between different areas, I think, to really kind of get that engagement as well. So. And I think that's it. I'll pass back to you then for the last bits.
Right, okay, thanks Tom, that's great, yeah. So as we said, we want healthy hydro citizenship. We don't want fighting in the streets. I've saved more water than you this month, so that's kind of the theme we're going for, but no vigilante behaviour. So just a couple of things really to finish off with the future. Well, as we said, that's the million-dollar question really, isn't it? I think the UK have got a great framework. They've recognised the need. DEFRA are really keen in supporting the change through FCRIP and obviously the other two innovation programmes as well. And kind of how will nature-based solutions be mainstreamed? Well, kind of two levels I was thinking about today. Southend, we've got a whole array of documents there, including the emerging new local plan for Southend. We've got our coastal strategy, we've got our local flood risk management strategy, and we've got the implementation plan. So when all of those were written, that was in advance of the new strategy. So whilst we were tinkering about with nature-based solutions, now obviously there's a much more greater emphasis on doing that, getting the evidence and putting it into strategies. So what we will do in the interim, whilst the national programmes and evidence gathering is ongoing, we're going to basically produce a kind of interim document. I know one of the outputs for SARCC was that we would demonstrate how we're going to integrate nature-based solutions into our policy. Well, with the FCRIP project, that's kind of overtaken SARCC. So we will be producing something in the interim, and then obviously when FCRIP is finished and the other programmes, we will then be in a position to integrate that kind of formally, I suppose. So just to finish off, really, just as I said, there was two misconceptions that I just wanted to get rid of. Basically, that there is a lot going on in terms of nature-based solutions across the UK. So please go on to Engagement HQ, have a look. There's a lot of work going on there. As we said, it's a 6-7 year programme. We're only a couple of 18 months into it, so it will be launched nationally very soon. But as I say, there's a lot of work going on, so please do have a look, do contact any of us if you want any more information. And just to finish on as well, yes, as an engineer, we do like concrete, we do like hard engineering, but you'll find nowadays the traditional engineer of the 1950s has gone, and we're very, very aware that we want to implement nature-based solutions and also improve habitats where we can. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, for those comments and insights into the future of nature-based solutions policy in the UK. Hopefully, some of our partners from Belgium and the Netherlands and perhaps France and further afield online can take some inspiration and apply it elsewhere. We do have an opportunity to ask a question or two. Bert, can we have a microphone?
Yeah, I was quite intrigued about this catchment to coast approach. Yeah, it's very interesting. Is all the actions, is it led by Southend-on-Sea, or you talked about the bigger fellowship? Southend-on-Sea is the lead of the gang, but you don't own all the land areas. So how do you convince upstreams to collaborate for your downstream problems? What is the carrot that you have?
So yeah, we are leading with Thurrock as well. So they cover the majority of the sites. There are some bits in between that we don't own, but partners are heavily involved with. So there's an Anglian water site in between as well. So, but yeah, landowner engagement is one of our kind of key priorities at the moment, and getting them on board. As I said at the start of my little bit, we've got backup sites. So if for some reason a landowner isn't on board, or we reach a point where it's not financially viable, or it's very heavily not financially viable, we can swap that in to kind of keep that learning. We want a couple of sites per kind of measure we're looking into to implement and things like that, so we've got that good learning spread. So yeah, we've got backup options should they be needed, but engagement again is going to be key, as Cornwall said. Something we've got a lot of work to do on.
But can you convince them that they need to take actions for Southend being downstream? So it's they doing investments. It's a bit like the ecosystem approach. Like they need to do investments and they don't take a lot of value from it because it's preventing damage in Southend. So that's.
Yeah, so basically, again, going back to the strategy, there is a realisation higher up in the ministerial sector that we need to have a catchment approach. It's in there in black and white, we need to take that. So the whole part of Catchment Coast through the hydro citizenship is taking people along on that journey. Now, as I said, it's very early days. We've done stakeholder mapping, we've had engagement with several key stakeholders, but not all. So the whole point of this innovation programme is, can it be done? And what lessons can be learned. So at the moment, we hope so. At the end of the programme, we'll know yes or no, because that's the whole point. You know, the whole point of having this funding is to try things. If it doesn't work, why didn't it work? What could be done differently? So we're not expecting all 25 projects through FCRIP to have fantastic 100% gold-plated outcomes. Again, it's about learning, and that information will then go back to DEFRA. They will analyse it, and they will decide if the strategy is going to be updated or the funding mechanism is going to be updated, what is going to be included in that. So it's going to be a lot of work, and as Tom said, we've got a dedicated comms and engagement manager starting with us very soon. So what we've been doing really over the past 18 months is getting all the background data. If you think back to the slide I said yesterday, make sure you get your science, make sure you get your engineering right. Look at all your data, what have you got, where are the gaps, what do you need to get. So that's what we've been doing really for the last 18 months, is getting that solid platform. So when we do come to do the review and the evaluation, we have really solid results that we can share.
Okay, looking forward to that.
Any more questions? Do we have any online as well? We do, okay. Thank you for engagement online, it's fantastic.
It's more of a quick comment, really, that it's nice to see projects like this outside of that Interreg bubble, as you called it. So I think there's a couple of people online wondering if these learnings can be shared across the channel as well.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said, with the Engagement HQ page is set up. That's, as we were saying earlier, that's run and managed by the EA. So as we go through the next few years, everything will be on there. So you will be able to keep track, follow, ask questions, and obviously share the learning there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, and another round of applause. There we go.